Welcome to Real Talk. I'm your host, Pastor Edward King. Take a look at the book of Romans 10:17, where it says, faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of God. Praise God for another day and another privilege and opportunity to share with you the living word of God. Thank you so much for watching the program. My hope and prayer has been that this program has been a joy and a blessing to your life. We look so forward to being able to bring it to you in the hopes that it's inspiring you, faithfully inspiring you to want to know the Lord deeper. And so, yeah, thank you so much. We really, really appreciate it. Today, we want to get into a different topic that with dealing with teenagers. And if you followed our program anytime over the years, you know that no matter where we go, we're going to talk about two things. We're going to talk about marriage at some point in time, then we're going to talk about dealing with kids. And today, I want to talk about dealing with teenagers and those type of things. And just kind of share my heart a little bit on some of the things that I see. Like I said before, we're not perfect. You know, we're learning. We seek knowledge on how to deal with this generation of youth. But for the sake of privacy, I can't refer to names, but I will tell you a few of the stories that of some of the things that I want to share and see. This week has been a very rough week. Of course, I've been working with youth pretty much most of my adult life. You know, through time that I spent at the YMCA, the Hope Center, Boys Club, you name it. We've had opportunity to work with kids over the years, and I've seen the change. I've had a front row seat to watching the change. And people say, well, what's different about this generation of youth versus the kids 20 years ago? You know, I see some of those things I want to discuss. I want to talk about today. But it's like I would say this not as a hopeless statement, but an encouraging statement that hey, we got to do better. My encouragement would be that when it comes to our youth, we got to pray and get before God just to find out more creative ways to reach this generation of youth. I strongly feel like the enemy has turned up the heat on trying to take them away and just pretty much, you know, there are things that happen. And if I'm being honest with you, there are things that are happening with this generation of youth that didn't happen in my generation. When you say, well, every generation is different. Yes, that's true. But it appears like this generation is getting worse. I want to start by telling you this Wednesday I went to an Empowerment Network meeting. It's if you know, for those of you that don't know what the Empowerment Network is, it's a community meeting that we meet with every Wednesday from 2 to 3. Different agencies, different faith leaders, different community leaders come together to try to work to solve the problem of gun and gang of youth violence. Let's say youth violence. And so there's many different agencies there that want to help our youth. Everything from reentry to you name it. Those organizations are at the table, and I'm so really proud to be a part. I've been a part of, being a part of 360, the Empowerment Network, for pretty much over 15 years now. In some kind of way, the Hope Center, where I work, you know, our organization has been at the table, you know, trying to help, you know, put our 2 cents in on what it is to help with this problem here. This week we had an interesting meeting. We had 3 individuals that were there at the meeting this week, and for the sake of privacy, I won't tell you their names, but they told their stories about losing their relatives to gun and gang violence. And I'm gonna be honest with you, I have never experienced the heartbreak that I felt watching those individuals this past week share their stories. The one lady, she shared her story. She said it's been 14 years that her sister was murdered, and the murder has not been solved. And she talked about a level of grief that, because she said it's one thing to have a grandmother get old and die, but it's another thing to have a young lady, like, you know, in the prime of their lives, taken out because someone decided that they were going to end that person's life. And she said it hits different. And I knew that, I knew that, but to hear these people Wednesday, it took it to a whole nother level for me. It took it to a whole, because sometimes we get numb to, you know, when we hear different things and it's not affecting us, if it's not personally affecting us, you know, we tend to get callous with it. But this time, this one here, I mean, it really, really hit differently. The pain and the agony in that young lady's eyes describing what happened to her sister and the feelings that she has even to this day of having to cope and deal with. what happened to her sister. Man, I think it was probably over 50 some people, 50, 60 some people in that room, and the whole room was quiet. Then the second person got up. She shared the story about her teenage son getting killed at a little, I don't know if it was a teenage club or a nightclub or whatever it was, but her teenage son was killed. And she talked about the pain of her life not being the same again. She said everywhere she turns, she sees her son, and that type of thing, and just the loss, the deep loss, and the trauma that comes along with having a loved one murdered or killed in that way. I left out of there with, my heart was just, I couldn't even get it together there. Then the last man, the father, he stood up and he spoke on how he got a call at 4 o'clock in the morning saying that his son was killed, and he talked about how his life has never been the same, and it's like your heart breaks for people that have to experience that, and all of us, I was thinking about it as I was sitting there, we've had our own personal share of tragedy in our own lives, in our own family. But you watch different things that people are going through, different things that people are experiencing, and man, you just wish that somehow you can take the pain away. But the lady was talking about the trauma of that. She made reference. The first lady, she made reference to when her sister was killed. I want to say she said her 4 and 5-year-old, her sister's 4 and 5-year-old sons were in the other room, as the sister and her boyfriend was murdered right in the other room. And it's like, I can't see how you can get your mind around that type of thing happening to you. And then and some of those, were young teenagers and that kind of thing. It took me back to, okay, all the reasons why we do what we do. You think about, I said, 20 years ago, the biggest problem, 20, 25 years ago, the biggest problem that we had with teenagers was, number one, to get them to stop smoking or whatever, or get them to stop having sex and making babies before they were married, things like that. Fast forward to today, the hopelessness and the destruction that goes on in the heart of our kids today. I'm telling you, it is, I don't know if those of you that watch this program know and understand, it is heartbreaking to watch this generation of teens experience and go through the things that they go through. I get the honor of going to the youth center every week. And like I said, for the sake of privacy, I can't mention names, but I go to the youth center every week. And when I started going, I've been going for pretty off and on over about 5 years, but consistently the last year, every Thursday we'll go in from 3:30 to 4:30. We'll go in, and they'll take us to the different units. And like I said, for the sake of privacy, I won't tell you what it is, but they take us to the different units. And when we started going in, me and another friend of mine, I said I want to go to the worst unit. And the reason why I felt like I wanted to go to the worst unit, because I wanted to be able to understand from the ones that committed the most hideous crimes, and the ones that are possibly looking at never getting out. I wanted to go and sit down and just listen to the hearts of those kids that are on that level. So we got the opportunity to go in about a year or so ago, and I'm gonna be honest with you. When I first went in there, the thought was, okay, do I really want to know what every one of these young men are in here for? And then I had someone encourage me. She said, you sometimes you're better off not knowing, because it'll affect the way you look at them. Well, of course, as time went on, it always comes up why they were in there. So you eventually find out the reasons why they are locked up. And I'm gonna be honest with you. When we went to this particular unit, half the guys that was in that unit was in there for murder. And then I thought about it. I said, okay, what's the average age? The average age of that unit was 14 to 16. There were some 17-year-olds in there. And as a matter of fact, there was one time there was an 11-year-old in there, and he was in there for murder. And I looked and I said, okay, I don't get it. So the more we start spending time with these young men, the more we start getting to hear their stories and then knowing them, for a minute, you forget that these guys are in here for murder. And what comes out of that, and what comes out is the fact that, man, these guys, they look like, there are times where we would be sitting around table, and we would have Bible study and those type of things. And I would look around and then say, okay, I don't understand why you're in here, because you look like an innocent little kid. And then there would be others that I would see, I understand fully why you in here. You don't never need to get out. But there was times when you started getting to know them, you start spending time with them, and you discover, man, these are kids. Many of them just, it's almost like going to jail for many of them. It's like it gave them the permission or the freedom to be a kid again, which is weird. But talking to some of these young men, I'm gonna be honest with you, you start seeing your own kids. You start seeing the kids that you know from the neighborhood. You never envision them doing the things that they've done to be in the position that they're in. And I would ask them questions, and I think people that know me, they know I'm always asking questions. But I would ask them, I said, what got you here? How did you end up here? And of course, many of the stories are the same. It's like, you representing the gang life, you feel like you have to do certain things, and you hanging out with certain friends and all those type of things. And I've heard many of them say, in the heat of the moment, you make a decision that end up costing someone their lives, and then costing, your life, or being locked up for the rest of your life. And then there's some, it's like, okay, what did you see yourself being in this situation? Then you start listening to stories about things that I heard many of them say, well, hey, I never thought I would live past 18. It's like, I'm thinking, okay, why would you think that? And then a lot of them would say because of the environment that they grew up in, because of the things that they see, because of the things that they were exposed to, which as a father, it makes me think like, okay, at 14, what are you being exposed to? What is the environment that you around as a father? If my 14-year-old son was experiencing these things that I couldn't help him with, right? And it goes back to, some of it goes back to single parents. The fathers are not there. There's no real accountability. I heard one guy say to me, he said he pretty much came and went whenever he wanted to. I'm like, what you mean? He said, if he wanted to leave the house at 2 o'clock in the morning, he would leave the house at 2 o'clock in the morning. I said, who was there to make sure that you was doing the right thing? He said he was staying with his grandmother, but he said his grandmother couldn't control him, right? Then I said, okay, then we start talking about school. I said, well, what is it about school? School is boring. They don't want to go to school. I said, guys, do y'all understand why the stage has been set for you to be in here? When you, and let's be real, and I said this in the last program, all of us have people that are over us telling us what to do. There's not a person alive that you don't have to answer to, right? We all have people that we have to answer to, but it's like when matter of fact, when you are left to yourself, the Bible says rules without relationship equals rebellion, right? Life without rules is like a city without walls. You can't do what you want to do, right? But then I thought about it. I said the stories of some of these young men, when there's no strong parents in the house, where there's no strong leader in the house to catch them when they're young. And what I mean by catching them when they're young, hey, if you're in the 4th or 5th grade at school and you're acting up at school, somebody's going to come up to that school and hold you accountable for your behavior, right? Imagine at that age and you don't have that. You cussing the teacher out, or you're acting a fool in school, and there's nobody there to come up, to deal with you. I heard a principal friend of mine. He told me, he said the worst kids that I can't tell you the name of the school, but he said the worst one. He's the principal of an elementary school, and he said the worst kids to deal with in his mind are the second graders. And I said, I looked at him, I looked at my friend, and I said, second graders? I said, why do second graders have this school turned upside down? And he said, a lot of it is because the parents won't back the teachers. They won't, there's these young kids, they know there's no real discipline. There's nothing you can really do for them. And he was telling me about this one particular kid that I knew, and he was saying how the little guy, when I say little guy, I mean, he's a little bitty guy, cussing teachers out, causing havoc in the school. The teachers, they hate to see him come to school because, like the Tasmanian devil, he's running the whole school. And I keep thinking in my mind, little guy. I remember when I thought back when I got in trouble in school years and years ago, I remember I was clowning in school. I used to go to Saratoga Elementary School, and I was in the classroom just doing my best clowning, right? And the teacher, she snuck and called my mom. And right in the midst, I mean, she didn't tell me she was going to do it. In the midst of me clowning, bam, I looked up at the door. Somebody said, "Ooh, whose mother is that?" And I looked at the door, and it was my mother. And I can't tell you for the sake of TV what she said, that what she was going to do to me when I got home. But the fact that I was clowning, the teacher called her, my mother came up there, and I had that fear that I knew I was in trouble when I got home. Imagine the kid that don't have that, where they can do whatever they want to do, act up whatever way they want to act up, and there's nobody there to keep them accountable. That's what a lot of what those young men was telling me that were in the youth center. They pretty much did what they wanted to do. If they didn't want to go to school, they didn't go to school. If they didn't want to do anything around the house, they didn't do anything around the house. If they didn't want to come home, they didn't come home. And I said, fellas, can you see the trap? Can you see the trap? Then they talked to me extensively about their involvement in gun and gang violence. And how they in their minds that it'll never end. It's like you kill one of ours, we got to kill one of yours, and just that mindset of just that hatred. And many of them, I asked the question. I said, you hate people, and you would even want to take somebody's life for somebody that you really don't know. Sometimes some of you barely even, you don't even know this. You're taking up other people's causes, and they say, well, hey, we have to go back on the block. I heard a guy say to me last week, he said that I said, if you got out tomorrow, what would you do if you got out tomorrow? And one of them said, I'm going straight back to the block. And I said, man, it's part of being on the block is what got you locked up in here in the first place. But because many of them, that hopelessness that is settled in their hearts, they can't see beyond their situation there. And I was thinking about it this week. I was thinking about there's how many of these young men, young men and women both, are just roaming our streets with that mindset, that hopelessness that have settled in their heart. And I have to admit to you, it got to me this week because, listening to the victims of those family members that were gunned down, murdered, and then I look at the mindset of some of these youth, and it's like, man, it makes you wonder. It's like, man, we're in a sad state right now. I asked a group. I have the privilege and honor of teaching another group, and that a group of teens that they come in, in our center, and we try to help them see, life beyond their circumstance. We try to help them avoid the pitfalls that some of their other peers have stepped into. And we talked about some of these things. And I asked them this question. I said, okay, obviously you guys are here because you want something different in life, right? And then of course they get paid for being in there too. So that's a bonus and a benefit. But I asked them, I said, okay, if I were to ask you, what are some of the problems that face our teens today? What would y'all say to me, right? And so we made a list, and I'm going to go over that list. We won't get through it all, but I want to share a little bit of what they share with me. I said, what is some of the top 10 problems or top 5 problems that teenagers are facing today? And number one, they said, was teen depression. And I look, when our older people used to say that about us, when we would, as kids, when we would say, hey, we're sad or depressed about something, the older people would look at us and say, what are we sad or depressed about? We're not paying any bills. We ain't paying any mortgage. But this generation, when they say to you they're sad and depressed, there's a lot more that goes to it than what it was when we were kids some 40 years ago. They said teen depression. I said, what is teen depression? What is teen depression to you all? And they talked about the despair, the hopelessness, the not liking themselves, the identity issues, the feeling of not fitting in, of not being accepted, all those type of things that we just as adults we can't see or understand, but these are issues with them. The feeling of the biggest one is the feeling of feeling like no one cares about you. No one gives thoughts about your life and your value and that kind of thing. Then we talked about teen drugs. Vaping is a huge thing among teenagers now. And they talked about how many of their classmates, for the ones that go to school, many of their classmates, how they're vaping in the school bathrooms and those type of things. Alcoholism. The drinking, the teen drinking, weed. They talked about how smoking weed is just a normal thing for this generation of youth and how they have to deal with that. Then they talked about youth violence. It's everywhere you turn. In their school, they have experienced some form of either watching someone be victimized by violence or hearing about their friends being victimized by violence. But they talked about youth violence. Sometimes I heard one of them say sometimes it's scary to be at school because of all the youth violence that they see that are being perpetrated in our schools, right? I said, well, where does that come from? What's the cause of that? They said a lot of it is just kids are angry. They don't know how to conflict. When they're dealing with conflict, there's no conflict resolution skills, really conflict resolution skills being taught. And then they talked about social media beef and how social media plays a huge part in the way the kids' attitudes are formed and affected, right? I said, well, tell me more about that. They said, well, back in the day when there was a fight at school, there was just a fight, and if you wasn't there to see it, then you didn't see it. Well, nowadays the cameras are always on, and can you imagine the embarrassment of you getting into a fight with somebody, and there's 50 people standing there recording it, and then posting the fight on the social media and all the comments that goes along with people laughing at you, or whatever. I have seen so many teen fights at school through social media, and I was making you wonder. It's like, man, I'm starting to understand now why they're in some parts of the city, in some parts of even the country, that they're banning cell phones in the classrooms now, because it has been taken and been used in way. I understand people, you got to have your phone. I understand that times are different. I get all of that, but I don't see how you can effectively study and get things done with your phone always in your hand. Because with the way the phones are built now, with all the things that are on the phones, you can't tell me that it's not a distraction. But they talked about social media. They talked about the damage of social media, the bullying, the cyberbullying that comes along with social media, right? You can, with all of these new apps and everything that they got on the phones now, you can take someone's picture and you can do all type of things with it now. So all of those things are pressure in the mind of a teenager. Is pressure for them, to kind of be the way they are. They said most serious beef that led to gun and gang violence and even some murders, it started through social media. Right. I encourage parents. I said, okay, mom and dad or whatever, sometimes it's good to look through your child's phone. If you're paying for it, then you got a right to do it. Look through your child's phone and just watch and just follow some of the things that they're into. Listen to some of the things that the devil is in social media. And what he's going to do, the devil ain't knocking on your door and saying, I'm the devil and I'm here to talk to your kid. No, what he's doing is he's attacking them through those social media apps, through those social media, through that social media avenue. He's getting his message across to the lives of your kids there. And I'm being honest with you, for some of them, it's doing a serious number on them, right? Then they talked about the lack of fathers. Being in the home, for whatever reason, dad has not been active in their lives, and all of that comes along with that. We're going to deal with that a little bit later also. They talk about sexually active teenagers, how it's just a part of the culture for there to be no restriction when it comes to being sexually active, being educated on the importance of, being a teen. It's like you think you know what you're doing when it comes to this area, but you only come to find out you have a baby by somebody that later on you can't even stand. And all of that goes along with, child support and all those things that I feel like that teens shouldn't be experiencing, that cause that extra drama to come and be a part of their life. Then we talked about God, the lack of God. How like many teenagers today, they don't see or recognize or understand their need for God, right? And so it's like, okay, so these and plus many, many more are some of the things that they're facing, they're challenged with. I believe it's our job as leaders, our job as ones that are called to this area, to figure out ways to be a part of the lives of these kids. I look at coming from the youth center. I left out of there this week with the heart of feeling like some of these kids are never getting out, and I don't know if that's good or bad. Some of these kids are never getting out, but it's like because of the mindset of what got them in there in the first place, it's so embedded in them that I don't know if they got out tomorrow, will they do the same thing again? It makes you wonder. But then you look at, all of the teens that are out here now, it's like you can't give them over to their side. We should talk about the importance of not turning the child over to themselves, but the importance of having somebody that's checking up after them, looking after them, following after them, loving on them enough to correct them when they're wrong, keeping them busy doing positive things, encouraging them to think beyond to think about the bigger picture of life, right? But what about the team that don't have that? What about the team that is left to themselves to figure things out for themselves? And I feel like we have too much of that going on. And so, yeah, my heart is weary in the sense of, the mountain is high to climb when it comes to our teenagers. But I'm encouraged by the fact that as long as God is on the scene, that He's going to give us the necessary answers and the tools that we need to help to impact this generation of youth, right? I think about, our kids, they need to know that we love them. They need to know that we care about them. They need to know that in the good and the bad, we're going to be there to support them. And so, yeah, to be continued. But like I said before, we just got so much work to do. But as many hands make for light work. It's not impossible. God will help us do the things that we need to do to impact this generation if we just don't quit. I'm Pastor Edward King. Thank you for watching Real Talk. And until next week, remember, we walk by faith, not by sight.